Hello, and welcome to Exceptional TV. My name is Karen Judd Smith, and I'm the creator of the Ultimate Difference Formula for Social Change Leaders and Activists, and founder of the Exceptional Leadership Academy. And I am your host. Now, for years, my focus has been on the people who lead, who truly lead, those who make good trouble in our world, as John Lewis did throughout his life. And these people are not always those with great titles or formal positions or power or authority handed to them along with a rather large salary. Very often, they are powerfully driven by a sense of social justice and a profound belief in the value of each human being. So what we do here each week is to take time to look beneath the surface, to dig into the deeper currents that drive people, and importantly, to highlight the clues their successes have left behind. After all, what better way can we honor others' lives by, as well as valuing our own, than by learning from one another's strengths and successes, as we each seek to do our part to help make the world a better place. So today I'm here with Behnaz Gholami, who has quite a story to tell, her journey from Iran to working in corporate America. Now, unfortunately, we had a little bit of an issue with the recording of the tech at the beginning. So we're going to simply jump right into where Behnaz is talking about how she gets to where she is working in corporate America in the area of change management, a challenging sphere of work in today's society, especially in the larger corporations, where agility and innovation is so urgently needed, and yet larger organizations often take the time to go through that change. But as we've all seen with COVID-19 this year, sometimes we don't get given very long to adapt. So let's take a listen.
Dealing with change from very beginning, like when I was a small girl, I had these philosophical questions about everything from my mom. And then, so fast forward, I wanted to just connect to people in terms of like my career or something like that. So to people and arts, basically.
And
But
you said, and art, people and art?
yeah, people and art, something like that, a mixture of these two. And then I don't tell you this story, but I somehow ended up being a techie, so I studied software development. So that was like, at the back time, it was a hot topic. It is still a hot topic. If you're a developer, the world needs you. So that's why I chose it based on the demand and all these things. But from very beginning, when I started my career, I was dealing with for ERP systems, and then implementing ERP systems or changing a system.
So for some of us, or the listeners who don't know, ERP systems.
Yes. Okay. So ERP systems are, just to make it like very simplified, are like really integrated systems that integrate the process of a company from the, like, let's say that supply chain to internal processes to the end customer.
And so that would include like email systems, communication systems, reporting, a dashboard of sorts for.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So Karen is a techie, can help you explain too. So yeah, and then when we were thinking about like these technical parts of these systems, I was thinking like and observing that okay, it's about people. So it's about system, of course, like all the implementation, infrastructures, and everything like that. But it's actually will just at the end of the day will be on people side of the change in terms of whether they understand the system, whether they want to accept that this is the new way of doing things, or like whether they want to continue the work like the new ways of working and all these things. So even before I knew that it's called change management, I was dealing with people side of the change.
Right.
And then just to put it in a nutshell, change management is about working with people through changes in organizations. Yeah.
Right. So then I just wanted to point out, just even in my own experience,
Yeah.
I have worked around large organizations of various kinds, but one of them that is fairly well known, at least from a distance, and that is the United Nations. And I know one of the refrains that is often heard there is that's not the way we do things here.
Okay.
To the when they speak to the NGOs, correcting the NGOs for how they. But I understand also when you're changing something, people have that same thought, but that's not the way we do things. So what do you do? How do you deal with that? And I'm going to ask you some more personal questions later on too, but we
Yes,
will get into that.
exactly. So let's just refer to ourselves as human beings, okay? So we're hardwired for security, for being on a safe side. And then from the beginning, I think that our ancestors tried to keep us safe and then keep us alive, okay? So I think that this comes back like the need for safety and security, and then so having this safe zone that you can live in, it's just comes from the very beginning of the human nature, right? So I think that then we bring this into the new world. So and then we still want the safety and security, but on the other side we are humans, and then we want to experience new things, because I think that this is the way life is, right? You want to
Right.
experience, you want to learn, and you want to grow. So I think that in terms of being a human, we always have this kind of uh, conflict, maybe not
Yeah,
conflict per se,
tension.
but yeah, exactly, tension, or not like this smooth conversation between my rebels part of me
Yeah.
and then my the one that really launched for security and safety.
Oh,
So that's why, yeah, and then that's the thing that make change hard, because you embrace the change from your very human nature, but
right.
on the other side, from your very human nature, you try to stay on your safety zone.
And then my understanding is that at the organizational level, you've got the tension, that same kind of dynamic, but at an organizational level where you've got, for example, the UN again, it needs to sustain certain standards and norms.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, society needs to change and upgrade. So there's a built-in tension, and I'm certain that every corporate and business, and you want to have standards, you want to have quality, even how
Yes,
to have
exactly.
quality and how to have innovation in the same place. How do you do that?
I tell you that you're totally correct. So let's say an organization is an entity that has its own like attributes, characteristics, culture, and all these things, right? Like as a human being, like we have their own attributes, characters, and personality. Each organization have their own personality, right? And then as a like the entity, also like going through the change is also hard. The bigger that you are,
Right.
or like the longer you're in the market, you establish your culture and all these characteristics of your culture based on your vision and mission for the company. So the bigger and longer you're in the market and the bigger you are, it's really harder to change and go through the transitions. It's like as we human being, the older we get, the more we want to stay on our safety zone and safe zone, right? So actually, I as a change expert, I just treat organizations and an entity which have the personality and culture. So this entity is comprised of its people. And then each person who joins this specific organization needs to be aware of the norms and all the
Right.
characteristics of the culture of that organization. So back to your question, when you ask about how this is possible to go through change, is firstly, I think that it's so simple, but usually like overlooked. So what exactly we are going to change? Okay, so because especially these days, Karen, we're talking about resiliency and new normal and all these things, but they are just, all the general words, right? But I ask like uh, questions, like precise questions.
Right.
Okay, so you want to be resilient, or you want to establish a culture of resiliency towards change. So what exactly resiliency defined for you,
For you.
right?
Yeah.
What exactly you want to change? Is it like the behaviors of people? Is it like how team meetings are holding? Or like, is it like the leadership level, how decisions are made? Okay, so the first vital question is like, what exactly you want to say?
What is it that you really want? It's kind of a very human question.
Yes.
The human element plays out in everything. We can't help ourselves. I had a question, and it was, how well do companies do at this process? I'm not going to ask you to put any one particular company on the spot, or whatever, but in your experience, what percentage, just to give us an idea, what rough percentage? And I know there are numbers out there for change, change, digital transformation, all kinds of other
Yeah. Yeah.
metrics out there. But what percentage of companies are endeavoring to change? How critical is it in this time, and how well are they doing? And you don't have to answer
Okay,
all those
so
questions, but
yeah. So, for first part of your question, there is a traditional, like, ongoing discussion about like what percentage of change initiative are
right,
successful. So, according to just reports from consulting companies, there is like a percentage of 70% of change initiative fail, and then I don't want
that's
to
fail,
get
not succeed.
not
Seventy
succeed
percent
exactly,
fail.
but there is a like ongoing discussion in the change community that what exactly this means. Like, it means that they didn't meet their outcome, or like in terms of time. So there's so many variables
Right.
associated to like interpreting this 70%. But let's say that, yeah, so not so many of the change initiative will be successful the way that the leadership and from the top level assume that it would work. And then back to my first discussion, it depends on then how big is the company and how established is the company. And then from the company to company and from the department to department, the nature of the change might be different. So, to your second part of your question is like, uh, changes are successful in some point, but the measurement and the benchmark of how changes are successful and what we call a successful
Right.
change is different. And that's why I come back to the definition of change. And okay, so how we define the success of change. So this will be the first question, and this varies because of all these different variables here. The second part is like, uh, are you defining change as, like, let's say, one project or one initiative, you go through it and then there is an end to it and then finish like a project, or you want to have the culture of change in your DNA of your
Right.
company?
Right.
So there are two different aspects of that. So if you're talking about change initiative, then we are referring to all the benchmark or the KPIs, like the measurements of the
Right.
successful change from definition to the end. If you're talking about the change as a like resilience company and like the change in your DNA, then we specifically work on the culture and the mindset of people from the like end and employees, like front end employees to top level.
So, as we look today at the massive changes that have happened to many people's lives with
Yes.
COVID, I mean, right now, we are not in a studio somewhere else. I'm at home. You're at home.
Yes.
Whether it be CNN or the ABC, everybody is zooming in or using
Yes.
WebEx or whatever it is
Yeah.
to connect and communicate and do their work.
Yes.
Developers have an easy job because they just, so long as they've got an internet access, they work from home. But there's lots of change. There's the social element of all of this, the lack of capacity for people just to stand around having a cup of coffee and catch up, and with all of this change taking place, what are some key things that you see are needed, not just for the expectations, because that we didn't even touch on expectations of change and management and leadership, etc., but what do you think are some key things from your experience and in your work for people as they are endeavoring to adapt to a very relatively volatile and constantly changing environment?
Yeah, Karen, there is something very typical that we use. It's called the change curve, and then you go through the change curve as a person, like personal. So it comes from the theory of accepting grief. Like when you lose somebody, it's like how you accept it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was mapped to the like accepting and adapting to change, and there are different stages to it, right? I don't want to go like more into the
Right.
like theory and then all these things, but I can tell you, we as a human being first don't accept the change, and
Right.
then try to nag, try to complain, and all these things, right? And then second, then we really like after some time we really realize that okay, it's the reality of my life. Then I am going through like okay, frustration and a little bit of sadness. Okay, like yeah, here is a real
Mm.
reality of the life. And then after that we go through the like the acceptance with a little bit of sadness, and then I acceptance and embarrassment, and then to the new normal. So basically this will be the curve of like any human being going through change. So my first and most important recommendation for people and even organization is like to acknowledge change, right? So to really understand that okay, so this is the reality of my life now, and then what was changing. So I think that the acceptance is the most important element for you that can help you go through any changes in your
And
life.
probably even for the bosses and the managers to understand
Yes.
that this is an emotional journey as well as it is a technical journey.
Technical, exactly. So it's like you should accept that the people who work from home for 3 months, when if they ever go back to their workplaces, they're other persons. So you should acknowledge that. You should accept that, right? And then they went through so many emotions and so many feelings during these times, right? So you should accept that they are not, and your organization won't be the same one because it's comprised of different people, right? So yeah, after acceptance, then you can do something about it. Unless you don't accept it and you don't just evaluate different aspects of the change, like what was changing in the functional and emotional
Right,
level,
right.
you cannot plan for it. Yeah, so in terms of recommendation, first acceptance, then empathizing with people to see that how they're feeling, and then let's I think that the most after acceptance, the most important step will be co-creating the new normal with your people. And if it's like your personal level, you can just be self-aware, analyze your need, analyze your fears and your angers toward the change, try to address them and then adopt, like step by step, one step at a time.
So in the case that sometime next year, because I'm imagining it's not going to be this year, people do come back more into the more traditional work environments, and yes, it will be a new normal. Maybe most of those employees might not want to come back to that new normal. By that time, they might have adapted to this one.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. That's actually the new normal. Is like many of the employees have this experience of working at home. It was obviously so challenging for
Right.
so many, but so comforting for so many. I think that any organization should talk to their people and say that, hear what they say. Okay, that's why I'm just recommending all the, like, in a corporate level, all decision makers connect to their employees on the emotional level, because the change that we are going through right now is more than a functional or technical level, like
Right.
home officing and like zooming and all these things is more of an emotional level, and you should understand your employees to see that what they're experiencing. Okay, what are the pain points of working at home, and what are the good side of the working at home, advantages and disadvantages for your own company, and then the economical and financial aspects that working from home will just cast on your company. And so then I think that if you talk to your people and understand what where they are in the change curve, and understand the general like impression of like how they like the new normal would be, then you can plan for it. So this is what actually I really do in the human center approach in change management, is like we empathize with people. I cannot just emphasize it on empathizing with people more. So you just put yourself on people's shoes, you talk to people, you listen to what they say, and then you go through the ideation phase to brainstorm the best practices, and then tell your people, okay, according to what you told to us, these are the best practices that we can do according to our financial situation or whatsoever, and then just get the approval at some point from these people, because I can tell you that if people don't adopt to what you're planning for them after these like changing dramatic change, I think you're gonna have problems.
So one of the key points that I'm hearing you say is that just I hate to use this analogy, sorry, but it was the one that popped into my head. Just as there is a lag between the infection, I guess I've been watching too much about COVID. There's a lag between the infection rate and the death rate. As people encounter change, there is a lag that needs to be taken seriously because it's a real factor for, as you mentioned just now, the adoption rate. It takes time. We don't flip a switch and then sadly, I mean, it would be nice sometimes. I wish I could have flipped my kids switch a few times as I was growing up and just tell them once and then they'd be done and perfect. Not like, I've got any issues like that. But so in terms of for companies or even teams, because most of us work in smaller teams, even if we don't work in big organizations, and some people do. What are some, do you provide, as you work with your change strategy and help work with people on, what are some of the things that you either provide as recommended steps or ideas for how to deal with things? Just even the people could use as an individual as we go through this time. And I thought it was interesting that you saw that change curve as you compared it to the story of loss and grief. And it is, change is a constant process. We're losing something and we're finding something new, but we've got to let go of that past first, or start in allowing the other parts in. So what are some things, any like just little tips and tricks that are good?
So Let me just categorize these two parts. Like, let's first talk about like personal level and then the corporate level, because
Okay,
maybe
thank you.
the language is a little bit different. So, I went through change myself a lot. Like, I lived and worked in four continents, and I encountered so many culture and different interpretation when we speak English, but somebody like uses the same word, but the background and the mindset is totally different. So
Yep.
we're talking about the same word, but we're not talking
Not in the
about
same
something
world.
that exactly. So these are all the changes, and I went through it like through 15 years of like going going around the world. So personally, what I recommend for people to do in terms of the step is like first is the self-awareness, that what I am feeling, what are my emotions, and then what are my fears, what are the angers, and all these things. So, this is the reality of my life. The second one is acknowledge change. So, the change is real, the change is happening, and then uh, the more I resist to change, the more I suffer. So, acknowledge the change and reality of the
You
change.
mean don't fight reality?
Yes, so I think that I just refer to the big quote from Carl Gustav Jung, the great psychotherapist, that mm, you can just go through the change and be successful if you accept it first. So the second step will be acceptance of the change. The second one is like, okay, so you withdraw like the elements of the changes that will irritates you. Like, I am angry because I am desperate because I am sad and I have these grief inside me because. So I just acknowledge all these things. Like, okay, so I am sad because of these things. So a little bit of root cause analysis for myself and what is going on inside myself. Okay, and then when you understand all these like bits and pieces of element of change and what's happening to me inside, right, you can plan for it. You're a smart human being. Okay, so I am angry, so and then this is this specific component of change may be angry, for example. So then how can I plan for that? Okay, so and then you talk to other people because we're all same despite of our differences. So you can use your own knowledge, you can use the knowledge of the close people around
Right.
you, and use the knowledge of community, or like the knowledge from books or everything else. So you should be determined to not be the, like, let's say that the victim of the change that is
Right.
happening. So you should lead yourself through the
So
change.
when you say not be the victim of the change,
Yes.
can you, tease that out a little bit more? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, because we intend to say that, okay, so environment is changing, or they're doing that, they're doing this, and then we see everything outside ourselves, right? So, and then sometimes it's inevitable because environment is changing, so it's not controllable that some
Right.
infection some virus come to the world, right? So yeah, it might be in external, okay, but you are responsible for your own happiness and adaptation and adoption, let's say. Okay, so take the responsibility. I think that after acceptance of the change and then take the responsibility that I can do something for myself, then you can plan accordingly and you can use all the resources of like knowledge or like community
So,
to
so
help you.
just say I was in an organization I just got a change. I just got a new manager and I loved my old boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a new boss
Yeah.
who's horrible. The
Okay.
good old horrible bosses thing. So I would imagine I would tend to think that I am the victim of my horrible boss. I'm stuck in this organization, and
Yeah.
so what? How do you deal? Do you have strategies for dealing with that in organizations, and do you have personal strategies that you recommend to people about dealing with? I'm just trying to bring some of these things down
Yeah,
to kind of day to
yeah,
day experience.
exactly. So because I focus on the individual, let's talk about the individual, and then I
Okay.
just talk incorporation and details. So let's say that personal level, you have this miserable boss, okay, that recently changed, like, okay. So again, so this is the reality of my life, and then I'm suffering because of that. Like, why I am suffering? Like, I am angry, I am sad, I cannot do my
Yep.
job, or something like that. Okay, so inside me, for example, this boss make me miserable because make me like, okay, I'm not valuable enough. Like, I cannot do my job, or like, if this boss is not satisfied with me, then okay, I might lose my job, and then in terms of like financial, I will put
Right.
myself in a limitation, or all these
Threats
things.
to
So
my
you should
family and my future.
exactly,
Yeah.
so you should acknowledge all these things, that what exactly is wrong with your relationship between you and your boss, right? And then you just, so as I said, that first you see what's changing and what are my emotional level, or like the functional level. Okay, what exactly this boss asked me to do that I have the knowledge or not. So in terms of like technicality of job and everything like that. So then the second step would be, okay, so these are the things that will make me sad or miserable, or anything else regarding to that specific person. These are the things that I feel threatened. These are my priority in my life. For example, if your priority is just have a source of income, then I think that,
That's
and you prefer not to put yourself again in your job market, then you try to keep your job. Then you choose, and you've like have the responsibility to connect to your boss on a deeper level. So in terms of like what exactly he or she wants, or like how can we make us happy, or how can I reduce the conflicts between us, or like what other knowledges or like trainings or whatever I need to do the job to make that person happy, or to make environment a little bit lighter. So it, in terms of like, how do you, it's just a matter of your priority.
yeah,
If your
and
priority
it
is
sounds like it's also your priority and owning your decisions.
owning your decision, yeah, exactly, it's like what I call responsibility. I am full responsible for my current situation, and if I want to continue that, then I should do something about that. If I did something about that, then things didn't change, I again have another decision to make. I
Right.
either choose to stay or not. If I stay, I won't make myself miserable, I
Right.
accept it, right?
Right.
So these are the things that go like in a, on a personal level.
So I suspect that you see a lot of folk who, even at the personal level, muddle through and don't do it very well. So is that something that you address in your corporate work? You know, do you work to help people at the individual level as well as the organizational structural levels
Yeah.
of all of this?
This is a good question. And back to your question that I didn't talk about corporations. So let's talk a little bit about corporations. So corporations, as I said, that this is the entity that have the culture, but you are talking about individuals and then adaptation and change adoption, let's say on an individual level, okay? So in corporation, I call myself, and I also talk about it in our change community, I think that our us as change leaders and change makers in the companies, or change management specialists, we are a little bit of the organizational therapists, because yeah, you should talk to people and listen what they say, right?
Yes.
So even on the corporate level, I always work with the executive level to really understand that, okay, I should go to the field and talk to impacted people in person. So I cannot plan for them without just interacting with them, without talking to them, without any data that is coming, like that is showing me what the challenges will face. Okay, so I usually try to go first on a like decision maker level, talk about all the pain points, and usually the corporations have these data, like secondary data from engagement surveys or any kind of surveys,
Right.
or any kind of historical data. So I think that decision makers and executive level already know what the challenges are, okay? And then you can, as a change person, I talk to them regarding, okay, so these are your pain points, and if I can address that, how valuable will it be? And if it's really valuable for them, I
Right.
just ask them to let me empower me to go to the field and talk to impacted people and bring about like how to see the world through their eyes. So, and there is a like a balance between the strategy
Right.
level that corporate goes and then the tactical level that really individuals want. So you cannot obviously customize your change plan to individual levels, but you can have at least some kind of like the department level or team level that they are going through same pages changes, or like they have the same issues or pain points, so you can plan for them on a department level or team level, or let's say that the segment level. So it's the matter of in terms of a step, is the matter of empathizing with your stakeholders who are affected by change, then ideating the best practices and best solution to eradicate the pain points, or evaluating the risk and then
Right.
just mitigate the risk. The second will be just because ideation will be a big, like you have so many ideas,
Right.
then you should
Right.
just,
You've got to.
yeah, narrow down the ideas, which one is feasible, which one has low risk, which
So
one
get
is
strategic about the
the,
changes. Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
all the things. And then the fourth step will be prototyping. So I'm not rolling out all the changes through the organization to everybody.
Right.
So we pilot and prototype, we test it, take the feedback, we iterate, and then at the end of the day, we celebrate quick wins. It's so important to have this sustainability of changes. And some people may, or like the leadership level may think that it takes time. Obviously, it takes time, but like we can do it quickly if we have the access to data and we can talk to
And
people. We can do have this small iteration on the
right.
time to just show the quick win, like quick result as we go.
And I can imagine that it's just very easy for people to think, gosh, this is going to take time. I don't know whether I've got,
Yeah.
I need things to be different before. But that's wishful thinking. I mean, that's just talk about pie in the sky.
Yes. Actually, yeah, like because change happens so fast and people like corporations want to adopt so fast and then go on. Sometimes in the middle of like working on change and all these change plan, they forget about change,
Yeah,
and they for the priority change because the priorities are changing all the
right,
time,
right.
right? But I think that to my experience, the best way is like even if the priorities change, you can just play with the
Yeah.
priorities and then just connect to your stakeholders
The
all the time.
the iterative process that you mentioned before,
That's it.
which is really kind of a that and the whole lean approach and all of these things
Yes.
that are very quote unquote common, not always necessarily well done, but they're nevertheless quite familiar to most in the tech world. It seems to me that this is a kind of a process that needs to be integrated at more and more levels and into older organizations and systems
Yes, and then
because of the
I
pay,
have
because of the rate of change. I mean,
exactly. And rate of change, because the change is very fast paced, and if you want to consider it as a project, we go through it and it will finish, so it won't work. So you should go through a small iteration,
right, right,
and then either on the corporate for the corporate level, on the decision making level and executive level, or like front end employees, everybody wants to see success, so some kind of encouragement to for the
right,
adoption to the change.
right.
So these small celebrations and
Yep,
small wins can help the
right.
change to be sustainable, because people say that okay, we're successful in some point, another point, so then let's do that, so this small iteration can help you go through more
Right.
sustainable change. But if you just think it like a waterfall, and then so you may plan for it, and then after 6 months people went through all this emotional level, and then all the just plans are just very old for the change, like change practices. So I think that this iteration will help you see the results very quickly, not to forget about change and elements, not to forget about the stakeholders, and then really see the benefits and the fruits of
Right.
the change
And
that
I,
you're going to.
and I think that's one of the quite fascinating things about big change is when you do focus on those small iterative adoption steps of that
Yes, yes,
process, then you do feel like you're getting somewhere, and
yes,
it can be exciting, and actually it's the only way to get to the big changes in the end.
yes.
Anyway,
And personal development, Karen, you know that. So it's like if I want to learn something, or I want to adopt like to a new environment or something else, I cannot adopt like during just a specific
right.
period of time, like one step at a time. Or like if you want to learn a language of one culture, you don't just learn a language, right? You learn
I
words, you
wish.
learn grammar. So it's just very obvious, but sometimes it's very overlooked and taken for granted in
Yeah.
organization. It's the nature of the change, one step at a time, celebrate the wins, and then go on.
Now, there was one phrase you pulled out before, and that struck a chord in me because I thought it was kind of an interesting thought. But we only have 15 minutes left. Can you believe? I don't think I've seen any questions come in at this stage, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about what it is that you're doing now, because I believe that you are working on something new, and I wanted you to have a chance to talk.
Thank you.
Tell us about that.
Thank you. Yes, so I have like more than 12 years of experience like dealing with change in organizations here and there, different settings and everything. And then I felt like you may plan for changes, but simply you may end up like not never see your stakeholder that you're planning for. So as I mentioned in the conversation, you may end up planning for somebody that you don't know, okay, and
Right.
you never meet them and you never analyze their need or something like that. And I personally have been suffering in my career because I really care about people, and I really care about the success of the change for organization on the two side, but they're just two side of a one coin. If you don't care about your people, you don't
Yeah.
so you got to be successful. So what I am currently doing is bringing more of a human ingredient into change management practices. So for example, human-centered design or design thinking. uh, I bring a little bit of mindfulness and meditation into the work because I did a strategic workshop beginning with mindfulness practice, and it was such a successful workshop for thousands of people. So I find it so very useful. So all this like human element in terms of like bring more people and subjective people side of the change into change management practices. But it doesn't mean that you're just the diving into just all this subjectivity without any plan or without. So I'm doing this systematic approach or maybe a blueprint or formula to just give it a structure to human side of the change for change management, and any other services, like let's say that we plan to design a service or a system for some part of the organization or for our stakeholder or customers. We should need their deepest needs and wants, so we should plan for that. And then finally, we don't create for our customers or a stakeholder, we create with our customers or a
So
stakeholder,
it's a
and
collaborative process.
collaborative and co-creation
Yeah.
process. So these are the things that I'm trying to bring into the field.
Cool. And so as you say, you're trying to bring it into the field. How are you doing that?
So as I mentioned, that these are like a pure human side and a little bit vague for so many professionals. So I am trying to translate all these things into change management practices. So it is understandable, it will be practical and tactical, so they understand it. And then I think that this will be a huge work of like translation, and then to see that to show people that you're going to get the result. So this is what I am introducing to the field, like trying to make it as practical as like straightforward let's say practice into change management.
So, are you doing this in a classroom? Are you doing this for corporations? Are you doing this online? So, anybody around the world can, how, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I guess you're going to do it by Zoom these days because
Yes.
you're
So
probably not going to invite people into your house for this.
I love to coach people, so I coach people. So I'm currently like this course, design thinking for change management. So I design it, and then it's already sold out. So it's like it's a group coaching session for 7 weeks, and then we go through the like all the different steps for the change management. But I'm also doing this, like bringing these practices to organizations. So if organization really want to be more resilient, or they really want to understand their employees after this phase of like dramatic change, I am bringing these practices to organization to help organizations as well. So I have this skill set of like bringing scientific approach and human-centered design and change management all together in one set to help organizations. And then for professional, there will be ongoing group coaching sessions if anybody wants to join me for future sessions.
Cool. So, you probably saw me doing something. And what I did here, and I'll see if you can now see it. If anybody's watching this and they want to I just put in a QR code, or you probably can't see it. I don't know whether you can see it. Can you see it?
No,
No, you probably can't. But I just put a QR code on the screen. And so that takes them to the exceptional.tv page. And there's a link there to your website. And I think that website,
yes,
yeah.
so this is my gift to your audiences. So this is basically a brief introduction of the tools actually that we're using to understand the deepest needs and wants of our stakeholder, our customer, because it's the first process to do the change management
Okay.
in organization, and the first process to design a service or product for your customer. So no matter what they're trying to do, you want to understand your customer deepest needs and wants. So I put the toolkit here as a gift for your audiences. They can download it.
Well, fantastic. So anyway, people just have to hold up their cell phones and they can. It'll take them to the webpage, your webpage on Exceptional TV, and they can click the link from there.
Yes.
I think it's just www.diachange.com, right?
Yes, it's diachange.com.
Wonderful. So,
Yes.
well, thank you for doing that because I have to admit I did ask, and I do ask people I bring on to, give my audience a little something. And so I think, as you say, when they use this toolkit, the questions, I guess they're mostly questions or
And it's talking about the tools, like a specific tools that I am
yeah.
using. And then as a gift to your audience, I also mentioned in the PDF file, if they download it, they have this free consultation with me to use to just talk about what they're trying to
Right.
do, and then how to use these specific tools, because obviously there are so many dimensions to
Right,
it.
right.
So yeah, there is there.
Yeah.
So it's included in my offer.
Yeah. Anyway, so thank you so much for that. People will be able to grab that. Now, we've got just a few more minutes left, and I'm going to come back around to the little phrase that caught my attention. I don't think I even told you what that phrase was, but and so you'll have a couple of minutes just to say something about it before we close out. And at that point, then I will also let people know who we've got coming on next week, because I think that's going to be quite an interesting conversation to hear. But the phrase was, I thought it was cute, change therapist.
Yes.
So that's something that you talk about in your change community. You see yourself as their therapist, or is that your term, or how did that come out? Because I think
Yeah.
that's a powerful phrase, and I think that's exactly what is going on. And so you don't have a psychology degree. Well, you might. I don't know. But
Yes.
understanding human nature and the normal life of the human element of everything is so critical to being an effective leader these days. You
Exactly.
know, whether you're leading a team or your own life, or or countries.
Yes, so I can just clarify, I'm not a psychologist or therapist, I don't claim that, but for my scientific background, like I have a PhD in social sciences, so there are a lot of like
Of course.
about like change adaptation, organizational behavior, mindset and behavior. But I think that any change person, like change management specialist or consultant who is going to just practice change management in any organization should know about the people side of the change.
Right.
So I'm just one of the advocates of this like thinking that as a change person you should be able to understand the neuroscience of change, psychology of change. You should have been going through changes to
Right.
see that how
Right.
people are feeling, right? So this is what I am doing. I'm always like educating myself in terms of like how people are reacting to change and what how we can entail like these changing behaviors from here and there. So I feel like this is the responsibility of change management community to educate themselves on the people
Yes.
side. But I also shed light on like not all the change management specialists are like practicing on a strategic level or transformational level. We have obviously like some changes which just have a tweak or like something very straightforward, so you definitely don't need to be that deep on these special changes. So some change management specialists or change leaders want to be on a high level or
Right.
like
Right.
transformational level. Some really like to be on an administrative level or practical
Right.
level. So it depends on a very personal preferences as well. And then I think that a corporation should be aware of who to hire or like who assign to a what project, because it really makes sense and it really changes the perspective.
Right.
But as of myself, I introduce myself as a transformer and then org like change therapist.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is what I like and my
Yeah.
passion is.
And I'm just going to throw out there, I guess, my own word I discovered. It's not my own word, obviously, but a word that I discovered a number of years ago, and I've kind of adopted it is transilience,
Oh,
which
okay.
is taking a leap forward. So it's a change by its inherent nature. It's a change, but it's forward. And
Okay.
so it's a transilient leadership. I guess I see it as that, which is a
That's nice.
fascinating concept because it implies, a quantum leap as well as moving forward and the steps that we do need to do to transition, through the change process. I would love to keep talking with you. Well, I'd love to keep. No, I don't. I want to finish talking, but I'd love to keep talking with you. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time. The QR code is still there. And I do want to remind people that next week we're going to have a really fascinating speaker. He lives in one of the areas of Syria. He's essentially internally displaced, and he can explain what that really means. But his specialization is in English literature, And his story of change and where he found himself and how he went through changes he did not expect. I think 9 years ago, most Syrians did not expect for their country to be the where it is today. And so anyway, we will have him calling in. I'm hoping that the internet from Syria will be good, but he'll be live and with us next week. So again, I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Behnaz Gholami, for joining us today. And yeah, and please, if anybody's interested, there's the QR code, and anyway, you can just find it at exceptional.tv and look around and you'll find Behnaz and her gift to you. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll say we'll sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for having me. Bye for now.
It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.